conscious of that fact after some of them signed up free recruits. This was after they'd been approached by Job Centre Plus. Meanwhile, other private sector providers are to be the subject of an official complaint to the Department for Work and Pensions by Oxfam. The charity firmly declined to take part in the work programme, concerned that those who refused to join or failed to complete a placement would lose benefits.
If somebody refuses to participate or needs to leave the scheme, their benefits can be stopped a minimum of 13 weeks and potentially for 26 weeks. So obviously the cessation of benefits isn't compatible with Oxfam trying to overcome poverty.
So you had an opportunity to help young people out of work, but you turned it down?
Absolutely not, and ultimately it was an opportunity we could never have accepted, with the potential cessation of benefits putting people into destitution for a minimum of 13 weeks. It wasn't something we were able to consider.
With 700 stores in the country, Oxfam, like Sainsbury's, has been unable to prevent what it calls forced volunteering by the providers who run the scheme.
We would like to ask providers to stop contacting our shops about schemes that involve sanctions to benefits.
Got my head held high, time to shine.
You've got a great voice.
One day.
The Deputy Prime Minister was at pains today to show the coalition is tackling youth unemployment. Firms will be paid to take on 16 and 17-year-olds. But more people are saying the emphasis of the work programme should be on jobs that pay. Riots that ripped through Harringay last summer gave added urgency to the council's Jobs Fund, which will be launched this spring. It's spending £2 million, directly subsidising employers to create jobs.
What young people need to get into the world of work is high quality, long-term, sustained experience. That's why we've been working with local employers and national employers based in the borough to make sure we can put in place these year-long schemes.
Ben has moved back to his parents in Lincolnshire and back onto benefits. He's volunteering at a radio station to use his media degree, but fears a double bind. As a job seeker, he may lose out to those doing unpaid work experience, and he may be compelled to take up an official placement himself.
Well, with us now is the Conservative MP Harriett Baldwin, who's on the Work and Pensions Select Committee, and three people who all have experience of unemployment and government work schemes: Khalid O'Beirne, Chris Brace and Ewan Natty. Well, now, do you understand why some people find these schemes offensive?
Well, I think you've got to understand where we came from. So in terms of the inheritance of a lot of young people out of work, the situation used to be that if you were a young person and you were offered work experience, you had to come off benefits. And I actually think that's profoundly unfair and against social mobility, because in fact a lot of prosperous parents can afford for their kids to do some work experience and lose those benefits, whereas those who rely on the benefits really needed to keep them while they got that work experience.
Do you
so
understand my question was why some people find this offensive?
I think that it's very unfortunate that it's
been portrayed. Why they find it offensive?
I think it's been very offensive that it's been portrayed by a lot of people as being something that doesn't help young people, because you know, Jeremy, in an organisation like the BBC that employs a lot of people on work experience. It may or may not help some people, and we've contradictory experiences here. Helps some, doesn't help others. If you're an employer and you're offered the choice...
My question is, do you understand why some people find it offensive that somebody can be taken on, not be paid to do a job which would otherwise earn at least the minimum wage, and be paid by the state, and the employer is able to use unpaid labour? Do you understand that?
Does the BBC offer work experience placements for students?
You don't. It doesn't bother you.
It's widely used
it doesn't bother
for these short work placements. And now, of course, these are very short work placements.
OK. All of you three have had experience of these schemes of one kind or another. It worked in your case, didn't it, Khalid O'Beirne?
Yeah.
Tell us what happened.
Well, my experience of volunteering was, it's not necessarily the scheme that's going out now, and I wasn't forced into it. I actually went out and applied for a scheme called V-Talent, where I was working for a year within youth services, and that was something that I was passionate about. And throughout that course, I was guided, I was helped, I was given qualifications, I was given certificates, I was helped at the end of it on getting a job.
So what was it about being on a course like that, in that sort of environment, that changed things for you?
I think because it was something that I was passionate about and because it was voluntary. I think if you're forced into it, I think it would be negative. I think it will have knock-on effects. I think that it will give you a negative view on the work environment itself. And I think if you're not passionate about work, why would they do it? I think there should be more things voluntary.
Have you had experience of one of these schemes?
I've had experience of one of these schemes. It was a complete waste of my time. 4 weeks, well, if you get on to phase 2 job seeking, which is the point where you're put into these schemes, then you have 4 weeks absolutely mandatory. You have no choice.
But doesn't that at least get you into the habit, with the greatest of respect, of getting out of bed and going to a place of work?
With the greatest of respect, I had 8 years experience previous to this of actually getting up and going for a job.
And we mustn't confuse two things, which are workfare, which is, I think, what Chris is talking about, and short periods of work experience for very young people.
I'm talking about both schemes. I've done the 4-week scheme in the past. I'm now on the 26-week scheme. Both of them were equally ineptly handled.
Inept in what sense?
They don't seem to... well, firstly, they're... anyone who's involved in it gets dragged off to do things by force, basically. Secondly, they administered badly.
Again, I think we're confusing two things here, because the work experience that was getting all the media attention today is for young people who are given short periods of experience so that they can have something on their CV to show to employers.
Okay, now you are a young person. Have you done any of these schemes?
Yes, actually the work program is a re-established program because it was run by a company called the U.K previously, and I was under a flexible New Deal, and I signed to the program, and in about 9 months of the program the company got liquidated because they failed miserably in getting people employed. And when you look at the current figures, statistically now, it was from 2.3 million now to about 6.3 million.
Yeah. So let's talk about your experience.
Yes.
The argument, I think, is, if I paraphrase it correctly, is that at the very least, although the precise employment may be not exactly what you want, it at least gets you into the habit of going to work and re-establishing a work habit.
No, it didn't get me into the habit of going for work. What it actually did was to demotivate me, because it took away my equal opportunity of rights, where something is imposed on you, where you're compelled to do something, and you don't have the freedom to choose something that would practically work for you.
Put him right.
Can I just again clarify that what was getting all the media attention today was a voluntary scheme for young people to get a bit of work experience. What I think we're hearing about here is some experience historically with previous work schemes under the previous government, and it was a complex tapestry and it wasn't working very well. Now the work programme, which only just started in terms of contracts last June, is really a black box approach.
Who agrees to start this programme by saying, if you don't carry on turning up in an efficient and satisfactory manner, you will lose your benefits. That is coercion, isn't it?
I think you have to have turned down several jobs before that starts to happen to you, those kinds of those threats.
That is not true. I have sat in with people on the 4-week scheme. I've seen people thrown off placements, one for speaking too loud, and they had not been sent to several meetings first. They had not had several interviews.
But again, can I just...
These were all young people who were on young people's scheme. There was 2 separate young people's schemes that we'd encounter. One of them was voluntary. The work programme ones that were there were absolutely not voluntary in any way. It was all mandatory. You had to turn up. You had to take part. It was part of the supplier's contract with the Department of Work and Pension that the person they send to them will be there for a 4-week period and will have a 4-week work placement.
So again, this is something very different from what we were talking about in the media today with the young people.
No, this is for young people. This is the 4-week programme for young people.
Which is a voluntary
No, it is not voluntary. Anyone who tells you it's voluntary is lying.
Why isn't it voluntary?
You do. It is. It is.
The rules, and we looked at the rules earlier, and they clearly say it's voluntary.
The Department of Work and Pensions sends you to a supplier. The supplier has in their contract that they will send you for a mandatory 4 weeks, not voluntary, mandatory.
I think it, to be fair, I think we are confusing two different things here. I think we're talking about the work programme that was put out to new contracts starting in June. The early indications on that are that about 28 to 30% of people are getting put into jobs compared to about 1.2% at this stage.
I'd like to
explore
with you, Ewan, why it is that you think that it's an outrage that governments and departments acting on behalf of the taxpayer, who after all has to fund benefits, shouldn't expect people to do as they're asked and get a job.
Well, what I believe, it's a complex situation, and what they're doing is to use the lower percentage of the population who are unemployed as a scapegoat, because you're still having these bankers getting big lump sum of bonuses.
The bankers are irrelevant.
Yeah, it's relevant but they are the one who should be penalised for this, not us, because we didn't cause the recession in the first place. So why should we be forced and impose a system to force somebody to do something voluntary for 30 hours a week for 4 weeks consecutively without a proper wage?
Well, I think it's great that these employers are offering work experience to young people.
Yeah, but they're not. They're now saying, one after another, one big recognisable name after another is saying, this is too embarrassing for us to continue our connection with this scheme.
I think that's very sad, because it will mean, and you know this, Jeremy, that from now on it will be people who can afford to subsidise their children to do work experience, and it will hamper social mobility in this country. So I think it's a great shame.
So you assert, but if these companies consider it to be an embarrassment to them, some sort of besmirching of their name to be involved in this scheme, it has failed, hasn't it?
I think it's terrifically sad if a lot of people waving copies of the Socialist Worker have managed to put paid to the goodwill of these companies which were offering work experience to some of our young people. And we all know it's important to get that on your CV early in life.
Okay, thank you all very much. Now, it's hard to know whether to laugh or cry if you're a Greek. The other member countries of the Eurozone cobbled